Question. If you're writing a Star Trek show, why would you wait 9 episodes in when your season is almost over to give the slightest indication that you actually like Star Trek? I don't know. That did happen in this episode, though, surprisingly enough, so better late than never, I guess. Now we just need some indication that the writers actually like comedy, and maybe we'll be getting somewhere. The episode begins on an alien planet where Mariner is interfering with what is clearly a pre-warp civilization, so this is all against the Prime Directive as I understand it. But screw that, because she has freed the lizard people from the tyranny of the rat people who have been eating them. I assume that's meant to be a joke of some kind, because lizards usually eat rats, but now it's the other way around. Mariners essentially started an interspecies war on this planet, which was peaceful yesterday since the lizard people were surprisingly chill about being used as food for the ruling class. But she doesn't care, because she did what's right, Prime Directive be damned. And so proud of herself is Mariner that she's sure the captain is gonna be gushing with praise for her violating Starfleet regulations and causing a planetary incident. Nope. The captain beams down and she's pissed off. Mariner was only supposed to observe and report back, but because of Mariner's disregard for the rules, now they might actually have to do something. Well, shit. The captain takes her aside and says that if Mariner wasn't her daughter, she'd be off the Cerritos. Mariner says that if she wasn't her daughter, the captain wouldn't be such a bitch all the time. Shockingly, that does not smooth things over, and the captain sentences Mariner to the most horrible, miserable, degrading, humiliating, barbaric punishment Starfleet will allow! Therapy! So the captain has Mariner beamed back to the ship, and then offers to give the rat people food replicators so they'll stop eating the lizard people. So she reprimands Mariner for interfering in a pre-warp civilization, and then she does the exact same thing. Whatever. A while later, everybody's on the holodeck shooting clay pigeons with Da Vinci when Boimler comes in. He's prepping for an interview about getting into some diplomacy workshop the captain's running, and he wants to learn the very best way to suck up to her. So he activates a program he's been working on, a simulation of the Cerritos and its crew that he created from 7 years worth of the crew's private logs. I guess the private part is more like a suggestion rather than a rule. But since the holographic crew is programmed to respond just like the real one would, Mariner sees this as an opportunity to vent all the anger and resentment she's been storing up for a long time. Because what this show desperately needed was an episode where Mariner is turned up to 12 instead of 11. So she reprograms Boimler's program, and then... I can't believe I'm about to say this, and I was as surprised as you were, I'm sure, but something cool happens. The new program activates, and suddenly they're in what looks like the title sequence of a TOS Star Trek movie. Like Mariner presents a Mariner production of blah blah blah, but it looks like the titles of a Trek movie. Even the aspect ratio of the screen changes. I actually got a kick out of this. It felt like something that a writer who genuinely likes Star Trek might put in a script. But as we all know, there are no such writers on the lower deck staff, so I got very confused for a minute here. The title sequence ends, and Boimler falls into a lake where the bridge crew are all riding jet skis. He tries talking to the captain, but she's not really having it. Then they get called in by the Admiral. Some imposter crew posing as a Starfleet crew second contacted some aliens, and the Admiral wants them to figure out what the hell's going on. So they shuttle back to the Cerritos, and there's another moment here that's kind of cool. They do a flyby of the Cerritos just like the flyby of the Enterprise in Star Trek The Motion Picture, where they kept cutting between the shuttle and the ship for like 5 minutes straight. It's not funny, but it feels like it was written with good intentions. Like they're just poking fun at something about Star Trek, but not in such a way that makes it feel like they think it's stupid. This actually feels like Trek laughing at itself, which is what I was hoping this show would be like when it started. They're also really overdoing it on the lens flares all of a sudden, which... I mean, if you want to poke fun at Abrams' Trek too, go for it, but the lens flares are never mentioned. Why? This is something you actually can mock and have fans be okay with it, and yet they never take the bait. So they warp off to someplace, and when they come out of warp, they're confronted by a hostile alien ship captained by Mariner, with Tendi and Rutherford as her henchmen. So in this particular simulation, Mariner has cast herself as the psychotic, spiteful, vengeful, murderous villain, which is not that far off from reality, come to think of it. The captain raises the shields. She's been programmed to be the Kirk to Mariner's Khan in this situation. It's another nod to original Trek that works because they're having fun with it rather than making fun of it. And it demonstrates that the writer actually knows something about Trek history, which is not always the case on this show. The captain asks Mariner why she's doing this. Mariner says she does what she wants, and she starts chewing scenery until the image of her starts glitching out and repeating itself. The captain realizes that this is just a recording meant to distract them. And that's bullshit because the captain just asked Mariner a question and she answered it. A recording couldn't do that. But yeah, this was all just a big show to distract them while Mariner and her cronies shuttled over and cut a hole into the ship. I don't know how they could do that when the Cerritos' shields were up, but they do it. So I guess the shields are bullshit too. So Mariner, Rutherford, and Tendi board the ship, and at long last, Mariner gets to live out her not-so-secret fantasy of being a mass murderer because she instantly starts gunning down everyone in sight. Yeah, they're only holograms, but still, it's kind of disturbing how much she's enjoying this. Then Rutherford realizes that a holographic version of his superior, Mustache Guy, is going to be around here somewhere. And that means Rutherford can say something that he's always wanted to say to him with no repercussions, so he runs off to find him. And if you know anything about Rutherford, you already know what the punchline to this is going to be, so don't get excited. And sure enough, Rutherford corners him in engineering, and he's like, "So, Mustache Guy, you think you're the best engineer in the fleet? Well, let me tell you something. You are the best engineer in the fleet! The way you program subroutines is really awesome, and I admire and respect you!" Then there's a poison gas leak, they work together to stop it, and Mustache Guy is like, "Hey, you're really good at engineering stuff too." And Rutherford's like, "Aw, thanks man, I really appreciate that." So I guess the joke is that Rutherford is a really nice, affable guy who respects his boss. I think we already knew that about Rutherford, didn't we? This might have meant something if these characters had some kind of history, but I don't remember them ever even sharing a scene together before episode 8. So what were we supposed to take away from this? Rutherford professing his deep admiration for a character that barely existed until now? Cool? So Mariner slaughters a bunch of people in the mess hall with an exploding Borg drone head, literally paints the wall with their blood, which doesn't make sense because when she was killing people just a minute ago, they just dematerialized because, you know, holograms. And then Mariner suggests that they go torture the cat doctor next, but finally Tendi puts her foot down. "Bitch, we're covered in the gore of our dead crewmates. This is really f***ed up, and I'm not playing along anymore." So Tendi f***s off, and Mariner figures, well, I guess I'll go murder the captain by myself then. And Captain Freeman thought this girl needed therapy. What a maroon. I wouldn't be fair if I didn't point out something else about this, though. I don't know how many people picked up on it, but they're doing an interesting thing with the video quality here, where it's kind of grainy and dirty, because I think they're trying to ape the look of old-school TV cameras like the one Star Trek TOS was shot on. It's actually a really nice touch, although suddenly it feels like they can't decide which incarnation of Trek they're trying to nod to, so they're just nodding to all of them at once. I appreciate the sentiment, writers, but you kinda need to pick a lane here, because the episode feels confused. Just pick one version of Trek to reference and stick with that for now. You're doing a riff on Wrath of Khan here, so keep that stuff and save all the other things and the Abrams Trek references for another time. There's plenty of stuff to make jokes about with Abrams' trick. You can do a separate episode on that stuff, believe me. So Mariner storms the bridge, brutally kills a bunch more people, then tells the captain that she wants her to stop treating Mariner like the bad guy all the time. Sadly, I think the irony was lost on her. Then, to prove she's not crazy, Mariner blows up her own ship. Okay. The explosion cripples the Cerritos, even though, again, the shields are supposed to be up, but despite that, the ship is torn apart and the big disk portion of it crashes on a planet just like the Enterprise in Star Trek Generations. Then we cut back to Rutherford, who saved the crew by beaming them all off the ship before the crash, but not himself, or Mustache Guy, or the captain, or Mariner for some reason. Just go with it. Meanwhile, Mariner and the captain are fighting to the death. Mariner's legit about to impale her own mother like a horror movie villain when she's stopped by a holographic version of herself, because Boimler had programmed Mariner into the simulation too. So now we have two Mariners sharing the screen at one time, which probably sounds like a nightmare to a lot of viewers, though there is something pretty satisfying about Hologram Mariner calling the real version a bitch, because Mariner's gone so far off the deep end, even herself thinks she's off her rocker. Good God. So Mariner is all, thanks for ruining my super cool matricide, you dick! The two Mariners go at it, and Mariner starts psychoanalyzing herself as she beats the shit out of herself. You only break the rules because people expect you to. If you were really super amazing and badass, you'd actually do the hard thing and be a good officer. They're not the ones casting you as the villain. You are, says the woman who damn near flossed her own teeth with Bajoran security guy's entrails a few minutes ago. Yeah, sure. Outside the ship, the crew is trying to pull themselves together and regroup. Mustache Guy says Rutherford is okay in his book, and maybe they should run away together and do super cool engineering stuff all the time. And I don't know if this was supposed to have gay undertones or not, but Rutherford is moved to tears by it, and they hug. So, keep reaching for that multiphasic rainbow, Rutherford? Then Boimler approaches the captain with chocolate chip cookies he made for her, but she's allergic, so he's tackled to the ground by Jet. Jet's the dude who was the ex of that girl Boimler was dating in that one episode. Weren't you just dying to see this scintillating character come back? So Jet takes Boimler away, and the captain thinks Jet is the coolest guy who ever lived. So the joke is that Jet is awesome and Boimler sucks. Ha. Then Jet throws Boimler off a cliff. So, if Hologram Jet is based on the real Jet, does that mean the real Jet is a murderer? Damn, maybe he should be dating Mariner. I bet they'd have a lot in common. Back to the Mariners. Real Mariner is about to gut Hologram Mariner like a holographic fish, but Hologram Mariner is like, you only think you know all about me. I act like I hate everything, but I really don't. The captain's just looking out for me in that insufferable, overbearing way moms do, but if she ever kicked me off the Cerritos, I wouldn't know what the hell to do with myself, and also I only let you kick my ass to distract you until the self-destruct went off. Then the ship blows up, the simulation's over, and Mariner realizes that she actually likes working on the Cerritos and being in Starfleet after all. Therapy totally works, you guys! And all it took for her to figure this out was going on a murderous, blood-soaked rampage. So, I guess the moral of the story is that murder is good. Just like Gene Roddenberry intended. Afterward, Mariner actually shows some humility, believe it or not, and apologizes to Tendi for acting like a lunatic, and apologizes to the captain for acting like a lunatic. Then Boimler restarts the holodeck program to try to pick something from the captain's brain that'll help him prep for this interview, but all he learns is that Captain Freeman is Mariner's mother, which is weird, what with them having different last names and all, but it's a secret they never wanted anyone to ever find out about. Also weird, you'd think that kind of thing would be public record, but if anyone ever learned this terrible secret, they'd be court-martialed immediately. Why? I have no idea. but it scares the crap out of Boimler so much that he completely bombs the interview. So the captain and Mariner being mother and daughter is a really big deal for some reason. I just couldn't tell you what that reason is. Although, after what I just watched, I wouldn't want anyone to know if Mariner was my kid either. Holy shit! I'm of two minds on this episode, because the callbacks to former Trek incarnations I actually thought were nice, and they felt like they were done out of a love for Star Trek, not a disdain for it like they usually do. The problem is, they were trying to do callbacks to so much stuff all at once that it almost became overkill. Just the callbacks to Wrath of Khan would have been enough for this to work. But they were doing Wrath of Khan, the motion picture, Abrams Trek, Generations, and TOS all at the same time, and they seemed to lose the point somewhere along the way. Each one of those things could have been its own episode. That they weren't just felt like a waste. Still, it did feel like their hearts were in the right place with this stuff at least, even if their brains were out to lunch. But then there's the Mariner stuff, which was just baffling. This was the first episode where Mariner felt like a real character whose flaws are acknowledged as flaws, and she has to learn something about herself and then own up to her mistakes. All that stuff is good, but it was done by way of turning Mariner into a homicidal psychopath. I don't even care that these were just holograms she was butchering. Anyone who would do something like this and enjoy it as much as Mariner did has serious psychological problems. So instead of thinking Mariner learned something about herself and grew as a character, the takeaway from this episode was that Mariner is a ticking time bomb and has a burgeoning mass murderer inside her just begging to come out. But hey, at least that's something they'd probably lock her in the brig for. So in some ways it felt like the writers were trying to do some respectful callbacks to past Trek, but then there was Mariner's unhinged killing spree, which felt more like a horror movie than anything Trek related. So I really don't know how to feel about this one. And seriously, writers, how on earth do you do an episode loaded with references to old Trek movies and not do a callback to What Does God Need with a Starship? Low-hanging fruit here, guys. Come on. One more episode to go, and then I'm done with Lower Decks, guys. So tune in for the next one as I cross that finish line and move on to something hopefully more interesting. In the meantime, leave me a comment, ding that bell icon, and follow me on social media to always be notified when I upload something. The link is down there. Thumbs up the video, share, subscribe, make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more very soon. So do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time.